Spectrovision Radio.
They're the old ones. If you stay out of their way, they'll stay out of yours. Probably. There is a veil between this world and fairy. If you let the fairies in, they will guide you. You're not scared of me, are you?
They claim that our eyes will just be created a slightly different from what they are. We talk these things are.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. Allison, how are you doing?
Doing okay.
We had a week off last week, a week off from the show. I know you didn't actually have a vacation. You still do all the things you normally do.
I just didn't do this.
Yeah. Got a week off from the show, which it's good for me every now and then. It's nice to recharge, and I got to work on some other creative projects. I'm deep into my book on fairies in Pennsylvania right now.
And it was Tim's birthday. That's why he allowed himself to have a week off. So happy birthday, Tim.
All right.
Belated birthday.
But we're back. And speaking of fairies, tonight we're going to be talking about this new film, Rabbit Trap.
Is that like The Parent Trap?
Not really. I'm trying to give a review without giving spoilers because it gets released in theaters tomorrow. It's a story about the Fae, and it's, you saw You Are Not My Mother.
Yeah, so I'm imagining it's sort of like that mixed with like sort of like an Alan Gardner kind of like.
That would be a good assessment. And Allison hasn't seen it. I watched it alone one night. It gets the creepy, kind of disturbing elements of the Fae.
Like unsettling?
Unsettling, yeah. This isn't a jump scare kind of horror movie. I would generally put it in the folk horror category, but there's like layers of psychological elements and this doubt as to whether this character, the child, is fully human or partially human or even a ghost in my mind.
And that's not giving away spoilers, you know,
I don't
pretty
think
quickly.
So. I don't think so. It is really well done. And my favorite thing about it is its approach to audio. And everyone knows my theory on audio and the other, that we are in some ways not allowed to take pictures or video. And by that, I mean, you can, but I've never seen a really good, clear picture of Bigfoot. Every time I've tried to take pictures of the lights at Site 7, we could be watching these really neat red and blue things in the woods, and they come out as white dots on the screen when we try to take pictures of them.
They're very rare, like fantastic ghost pictures.
Yeah, yeah.
But you hear a lot of crazy EVPs. Even I would admit that. Like, I've heard some things where I was like,
exactly, yeah. So, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying audio seems to be a more accessible way to document the other. And there's a line in this film. Through your eyes, you enter the world. Through your ears, the world enters you. You're going to be hearing that line on Strange Familiars in the future. I guarantee it, because to me, when that was spoken in that film, I went, that's it. That's it. That's part of the key to why we're allowed to record the paranormal audio and not video. Because it's an experience that comes to you, and it's about...
Is it about listening to the other as opposed to observing it? Because it's almost
you
like...
You are observing it, but when you try to capture something with video, and Octavian actually said this, every now and then he comes up with a good idea. There's an element of ego to it, I think, when you try to capture a picture of something, because it's like, oh, I'm going to show it to the world. I'm going to show this, and I'm going to prove people, I'm going to show people what these things are. Where with audio, it always leaves that sort of question mark. People are going to be like, well, okay. I mean, in the interview coming up, I referenced the Sierra sounds as peak paranormal audio. They have been analyzed. These tapes, the Sierra sounds, have been analyzed by experts at multiple universities It's not trickery. Whatever was recorded on those tapes. And the voices go both higher and lower than human vocal range. And cryptolinguists from the Navy have listened to it and they say, yeah, there's a language being spoken here. We don't know what they're saying, but we can tell that it's a language. Super interesting. And they have tons and tons and tons of audio of that. But there will always be a doubt, right? What made those sounds?
Yeah.
You know, the guys who recorded it said Bigfoot. To my knowledge, they never saw Bigfoot actually speaking those sounds. They were seeing Bigfoot up there and they were recording those sounds.
But that doesn't mean.
But that, yeah, I mean, to my knowledge, they never actually saw the Bigfoot speaking those sounds. There's always going to be a question, right? And I think that's part of it because the other there's always going to leave a question. And there's a bigger question, I think, with audio than video. Like, that may change with AI now because everything's a question, right? Every video is a question. But in my mind, audio is the way to go. And again, that line, through your eyes, you enter the world. Through your ears, the world enters you. Bryn, the writer of the film and director, he heard that line from a professor he said at film school. And the way he put it is like, with your eyes, you're a hunter. With your ears, you're a trapper. You know, it's the difference of sort of being a little bit more passive. You know, and I really like that line too. I like that analysis.
And, you know, I think too about certain cultures and there's suspicion of like tangible, physical object with photography.
Oh.
You know, where like there is some idea that maybe it'll steal your soul or make you prone to, like Octavian said, the ego.
So this film gets I don't know what my review system is. What was our review? So we were doing reviews there for what?
We were doing 1 through 5, which I always felt was like incomplete because I like a lot of gray area.
For me, this is a 5-star film. The audio is really cool in it too. That's the other thing I like. As someone, I don't know. Am I an experimental musician? I'm a musician who occasionally experiments. How's that? Whatever that means. But as someone who appreciates those kind of sounds, I mean, it's so cool. Like the sounds in the movie are just really, really cool, really neat. The manipulation.
And who did the music?
Graham Reznick was the sound designer.
Okay.
So someone else did the actual soundtrack, but he did like the sound design, like all the weird kind of creepy sounds of the other. And we had a whole discussion before we hit record. Graham and I, about just like techniques and the different tools he was using to tweak it. Some of which I could tell by listening. I was like, oh, I know what you used. And I was like, you know, we were kind of nerding out, I suppose, geeking out on equipment a little bit before we hit record on the interview. So it was a lot of fun. The interview coming up is with Bryn Chainey, who's the writer and director, Graham Reznick, who's the sound designer, and Daniel Neller, the producer. So I'll be talking with those three folks coming up. The one thing we didn't do is we kind of jumped right into the conversation. And we didn't really give a description of the movie, a plot summary. We just jump right into things. So I'm going to read just the plot summary off the actual website for the show so people get an idea what it is. It's seeking new inspiration and a fresh start. Married musicians Daphne, played by Rose McEwen, and Darcy, played by Dev Patel, moved to the Welsh countryside to finish their new record. While collecting audio samples, Darcy inadvertently creates a field recording of mysterious sound never before heard by human ears. The discovery renews Daphne's creative energy, but as the echoes of her music bleed into the surrounding landscape, ancient and malevolent woodland forces are disturbed. One day, a stranger arrives on their doorstep. The couple initially embraces the stranger, who helps them navigate and understand their new environment, but Darcy grows suspicious of his obsession. As jealousy and paranoia infect the makeshift family, the line between reality and myth begins to blur. So it's starring Dev Patel, Rosie McEwen, and Jade Crute. There are 3 human actors in this.
Okay. And some bunnies.
Some bunnies. And I, again, in the interview, I kind of said, well, there's kind of 4 characters. The third being the landscape and the fourth being the sound. Both are very important, I think, to the story. Rabbit Trap, it's in theaters this Friday. Gets my highest recommendation. Dev Patel, one of my favorite actors. I mean, from The Green Knight to Monkey Man, now this. Excellent, excellent stuff. Before we get to the interview, I want to play the audio trailer for Rabbit Trap. I'll insert that here, and we'll begin the interview after that.
1976. Darcy and Daphne Davenport are married musicians who move to a remote cottage in the Welsh countryside to finish Daphne's new record.
Maybe I should just go back to London for a few weeks to finish the record there.
How about yesterday? You were recording for hours.
Yeah, it was all rubbish.
When Darcy explores deep in the forest to record audio samples, he stumbles upon a mystical sound never meant to be heard by human ears.
Gus, what is this?
Sounds like a spell.
It's sublime.
Drawn by the sound, a strange child soon becomes a part of their lives.
I followed the music.
You could hear that.
Sound travels here.
And from the forest comes something far older and far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined.
They're the old ones. If you stay out of their way, they'll stay out of yours. Probably.
And their lives soon begin to come apart.
Darcy is tainted.
There are things I haven't told you.
When words are left unspoken, beware what fills the silence.
There is a veil between this world and fairy.
If you let the fairies in, they will guide You're not scared of me, are you?
Dev Patel, Rosie McEwen, and Jade Crute star in Rabbit Trap, a Spectrovision production of a Bryn Chainey film. Only in theaters, September 12th.
Welcome to Strange Familiars, everybody. And we're here talking with Daniel Noah, who's the producer of Rabbit Trap, Bryn Chainey, who's the writer and director, and Graham Reznick, who's the sound designer. Thank you all for coming on Strange Familiars.
Thank you.
So,
thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I guess each one we should so people know your voices. So Daniel, say hello.
Hi, I'm Daniel.
And Bryn.
Hello, I'm Bryn.
And Graham.
Hello, I'm Graham.
So kind of have some questions for each of you, and then we can kind of incorporate the whole thing. Starting out with Bryn, the story feels like very old. It feels like a really sort of traditional fairy story in many ways, but translated into the 1970s. Did you research a lot of the old like fairy folklore for this?
Yeah, I did. I spent a few years researching. I used the research as a bit of an excuse to not write the script for a long time. You know, I had some beginnings of a story idea around a couple in crisis, and particularly about an insecure husband who works with his wife, and their kind of some sort of unconscious repression bubbling up. I always knew that was going to be the beginning of the story, and it felt really natural to integrate fairy lore into it, just because almost everything I write integrates fairy lore. It's just kind of what I grew up reading, and it's just the thing I'm most interested in is finding modern ways to do folk tales. So yeah, like a lot of research went into particularly Welsh folklore and fairy tales, and I was really trying to get to the heart of what it meant, like not just finding little details to scatter through the story, although there are lots of little Easter eggs for folklore nerds to find. It was more about finding the connection between the psychological issue at the heart of the film and the logic or the emotional logic of the fairy folk of Wales. And that's what I was really trying to find. I think I eventually found it through both sound and the third character of the film, which is this unnamed child that shows up who has a particular connection to the folk. Does that answer the question? I don't know if it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Loads of research, and it was mixed with my imagination of trying to find connection points between that and the story I had in mind.
There seems to be sort of a current in some modern films of sort of recapturing the essence of these fairy stories and the dangerousness of the fairies versus, your Victorian little pretty Tinkerbell fairies and stuff.
Yeah. But you mean as in fairies not being pretty little?
Yeah, and there was a real danger. The idea was like it was dangerous to be in contact with the fairies.
Yeah, completely. What I particularly like about Welsh fairies or Celtic fairies is that they're not entirely good or entirely bad.
Right.
They are just our kind of cantankerous neighbors who live just beyond the veil and mostly want to be left alone, but every so often crave attention and crave a bit of connection and want to get involved in our lives. And they're really emotionally hard to pin down.
Mm-hmm.
The more I read about them, the less consistency I found in their behavior, that their attitudes towards humans shift radically based on how well they're being treated by the people, or if the rules are being followed. And what my interpretation of that was, or at least my focus became the childlike aspect of the fair folk. And when I say childlike, it's not in that kind of cutesy Victoriana kind of way. It's the side of a child that will trash the house if it doesn't get what it wants, or it will demand your attention and all of it.
Right.
And for a child, it feels like a matter of life and death. If a kid doesn't get love and attention, it might die. And I feel the same with fairies, that when they need to be heeded, they need to be heeded. And you're in massive trouble if you don't do what they say. So that's the side of the fairies I was interested in. It was kind of a connection between the emotionally unregulated inner child inside all of us. And I think fairies are a really excellent kind of mirror to that. I don't think they're a metaphor for it. I think they're a mirror, or kind of a manifestation of something that's universal in living things, which is the hungry, desperate child, the kind of wild twin that we lost in the woods a long time ago. And our job as adults is to go back into the woods and find it. That's my take on the fairies and the kind of side of them I wanted to bring back. Yeah.
Was there a specific reason for setting the film in the 1970s?
Ooh. I actually don't remember exactly the moment I decided on that era. I think it was when I decided to use sound artists as the center of the film. So the main characters are both musicians. They make experimental electronic music. I got really interested in analog electronic music particularly, and how it's not based on sampling sounds, which you manipulate, but it's about manipulating an electrical current to create a certain waveform, which makes a sound. And that for me has such a clear link to cosmic horror as a trope, where you tap into an energy force that you're not supposed to. I thought, what happens if you make electronic music in a haunted landscape, where you're drawing up the electricity from the land and you're manipulating it into music, but you didn't realize that the electricity you're drawing is actually haunted or conscious or connected to the ancient folk. So once I made that connection, I thought, okay, well, I want the musicians to be working with analog electronic music for that reason, but I don't want them to be doing it in a nostalgic or retro way. They need to be pioneers. They need to be going somewhere where no one's been before. So that made a lot of sense to now set it in the 70s, so that they weren't a nostalgia act as artists. They were right at the vanguard of what's new. So we watch the movie and it feels nostalgic, but the characters are doing something new. So I think that was the original reason it was set in the 70s.
I didn't know if there was any sort of trying to sort of resonate with that sort of classic era folk horror, as well.
I mean, I do love that era. I mean, the movies like Witchfind the General and Blood and Satan's Claw. I love the look of those films and the way that the landscape is shot, and the 35mm film. And we did all that stuff. I mean, we shot on 35mm.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And, we really shot on location, and we used all original kind of sound gear in the studio that you see in the film. We tried to make it with a sensibility of the 70s without turning it into like a nostalgic, not using nostalgia as a kind of aesthetic, but to just kind of, for it to feel lived in and natural to the story. And the big references for the movie were all from the 70s, also just by chance. Like Robert Altman's film Images was a really big influence on the film, it looks just like our film. And I could ramble about the cinematography, but
why Wales versus maybe like Ireland or Scotland as far as dealing with the Celtic?
Because that's my culture. I'm half Welsh. My dad grew up. When I grew up, my dad would read me folk tales and fairy stories from there. I grew up doing trips to the woods in Wales, and it's just the that's the element of Celtic lore that I'm most familiar with and felt the most qualified to talk about. But yeah, there's a lot of it. I think the fair folk don't care about our boundaries. You know, they've been there since long before we built hedgerows and motorways and country names, you know. So I think the Celtic fairy folk are all connected. But probably none of them don't like each other either. It doesn't seem like the fair folk get along very well. They don't have a union that they're like, solidarity with our Irish brothers. I think they're just as petty and xenophobic as humans. So, but yeah.
We have a community here, right in York County where I live, that still has a Welsh-speaking population. They were brought here
in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, they were brought here to mine slate. They still do church services in Welsh in this town every Sunday. And when I'm collecting I love collecting folklore, and I know the woman that sort of runs the historical society down there. And I said, you got to get me Welsh people to talk to, because everyone brings their folklore with them, and I know there's fairy stories here, and I need. And she said to me, "You will never get the Welsh people to talk about that."
Yeah, it's true.
Really?
Yeah, it's very. Also, the thing is, it's also partly it's because there's a superstition to it, and it's not something people are proud of. Most people are not proud of being superstitious. They keep it hidden away. But also, Welsh culture of like my parents and grandparents' generation, the English tried to beat it out of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was not allowed to speak Welsh in school. If you were caught speaking Welsh, then they put like a heavy wooden sign around your neck that you had to. It was like a shame piece, a symbol of shame. And then the only way to get rid of it was to rat out that somebody else was speaking Welsh.
Oh wow!
And then it was passed to that kid. So then that way, everyone was turning on each other, and that went across all of Welsh kind of culture. And it was, I'm half English, half Welsh, so I kind of got this like constant self-loathing, and deservedly so. And they tried really hard to beat the Celt out of the Welsh people, but they didn't succeed. And now Welsh is back in schools, and people are learning. People are bilingual in a lot of Wales now, and people are recapturing the pride in a side of their culture that predates the English, predates the Saxons, the Angles, the Normans. It predates the Romans arriving in the UK. That there is a side of the British Isles which is as close to native as you can get, with any island. So, yeah, they're a proud people, the Welsh, but also they've been taught to have shame. That's being shaken off now, which is also, to link it back to the film, the story of Rabbit Trap. It's about kind of reconnecting with nature as a way to shake off shame that is repressing a side of you that needs to come out.
Not to get us too off track from the film, but in this town, it's called Delta, there's a cemetery that has tombstones that are all in Welsh, but they were carved out of slate. And they said, and I don't know if this is universal, but at least here, the Welsh said they had a story about the slate, and they said the stone doesn't sing in English. So in other words, Welsh people could, and these are the most beautiful tombstones you've ever seen in your life, carved out of slate. They're absolutely stunning, and they look like today, like they look brand new. Yeah. They look absolutely brand, because the slate just holds up way better than stone or anything else. They're amazing, amazing things. Yeah. Anyway, not to get too off track, but so fairies and ghosts, I know in folklore, are sometimes inseparable. Often they, like, depending on who you read, people say, the souls of the dead became the fairies, or vice versa, etc. Was this child an intentional lean into that aspect of folklore? Because he has a very sort of ghost-like quality in some ways,
Tell me more. Tell me more about this, what that means to you.
Well, again, I'm just knowing, like fairy folklore, knowing sometimes they were said like, oh, it's the souls of the dead became the fae, or were among the fae. Yeah. There was a very, almost like this child had parents that he lost, and was trying to replace them with the two main characters of the film, or something like that. So there was almost a ghost-like element to it in my mind.
I love that. I'm glad that you caught the kind of the spirit of the child. I think it's not a spoiler to say that. I mean, the two main characters of our film are this married couple, Darcy and Daphne, and then the third character of the film is a child that is local to the region, and then the child becomes obsessed with the couple and wants to join the family. And think that's the extent of what we can know about that character. Well, number one, because I don't want to give huge spoilers away. But I think I said something similar just before about the fair folk and the kind of nature. If there is a consciousness within the Welsh landscape or any landscape, I think it's the same as, I don't want to get too kind of esoteric, but actually maybe this is the podcast to do it. I'm allowed to be esoteric, right? Hippy dippy. Okay, great. So if we feel longing, of course, everything feels longing, right? Trees, the fields, and the mushrooms, they want to belong in the same way that we want to belong. They are hungry for nutrients, and the nutrients are not all entirely biological. Maybe they're actually psychological or spiritual in some way. And that's kind of what I was trying to land on with this villain, is not to create classic evil child or evil, like a demon seed trope, where we have this potentially evil third character that we have to vanquish. I thought, what's more interesting and maybe scary to me is a character that is so desperate to be accepted, they will go to dangerous, impossible lengths to get what they want. You know?
There's sympathy with that character, which I think helps with that. You don't fully like, oh, this is just some evil demon kid, like he's bad. You have a sympathy with him.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also a testament to the actor. Like,
he was fantastic.
Right? Yes. I mean, also the fact that this is a kind of an ageless, nameless kind of teenage boy character that was played by a 25-year-old woman called Jade Crute, who was she's an absolute...
I didn't even realize that. I did not even realize. No.
It's a little woman. It's a little woman from the Welsh Valleys.
Oh my goodness. Amazing.
Prefers tea to coffee, and she loves Anthony Hopkins and rugby. And she's terrific, and she was willing to, cut all her hair off and adjusted the way she walked and inhabited this character to make it, if not a boy, to make him kind of genderless. And she just brought such a vulnerability and intensity to the role.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic.
Feel the longing, and I find melancholy and longing very powerful on screen and in life. I think it's quite disarming when a character is oozing this kind of, oozing melancholy. I find that really gripping on screen. I think she really captured that. It made the character much more interesting than, like creepy kid from the woods.
All the actors,
it's a much richer character than that.
All the actors, fantastic. Dev Patel is one of my favorites. I absolutely love everything he's done. So
it's terrific.
Going into that, you have this level of an actor, and then to bring. I'm assuming Jade was fairly new to this.
Yeah. I mean, she's going off. I mean, she just yesterday premiered a new movie at TIFF called Sacrifice, which is a Roman Gavras movie, and she's done a lot of things in the last 2 years since we shot. So she's going up, and she's, people are recognizing that she's a very versatile little force of nature.
Yeah.
She's the closest thing to a real life goblin you're ever going to get. She won't mind me. Hopefully she won't mind me saying that.
She'd love it.
Yeah. Oh man, she was amazing. She was great. And Rosie and Dev were just so, I mean, this is a kind of a fairy tale horror or folk horror kind of psychedelic trippy thriller, but we built it around the performances and around the relationships, the psychology between the three characters. And I think Rosie McEwen, Dev Patel, and Jade Crute, they all just went to these very vulnerable, interesting, murky places.
Yeah.
That hopefully is integrated with the genre elements. It's not drama with like spooky bits or like bangs. This is a movie of subtle moves and mystery and kind of surreal elements that weave in not just the visuals, but the performances are kind of surreal. So at places where there is a mystery to why the character's acting the way they are, and you need to do some work to decipher it. Hopefully it's rewarding for an audience, but I think those three, I'm just grateful that they went there, because this is quite a risky film as a script, because it isn't a film that gives you clear answers.
Right.
And for actors, that's quite tough. How do you play a scene embodying mystery?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's up to the audience. Yeah, we'll see. I hope some of your listeners get to watch it and see what I'm talking about, because I'm trying to skirt around spoilers.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say maybe the fourth character might be the landscape and the fifth might be the sound. Honestly, they're both of those things are so important to the story.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
Fourth is the sound, fifth is the landscape. Let's just get that.
That brings us to our other lead actor, Graham Reznick.
Yeah. Well, the sound is an incredibly important part of Rabbit Trap. And this is sort of for both of you, like starting off with Bryn, and then we can move into Graham here. So did you know how much sound would play a part in this as you were writing it, or did it become more important as you were actually making the film?
No, it's built into the script. I mean, the script has whole passages which just describe sound.
Oh, really?
And something I try to do is with each scene, this wasn't all entirely as I was writing it. There was a few passes I did later on where I asked myself, right, how does this scene sound at the beginning and sound at the end?
Mm.
And the next scene, what is the shift, or how does this transition? Like usually in screenplays, we look at transitions, but they're almost always visual transitions. And I wanted to make sure the sound transitions were kind of built in. And that definitely changed because Graham achieved something much more kind of rich and strange than I could have written, but it was an attempt. I attempted, I think, to make it a movie that when you read it, you hear it. And it really, that spoke to the right people who came on board, like Daniel, and like Elijah and Lawrence, who produced the film. Like they would read it, and the fact that they appreciated the sound element of it meant that they were, I think that's a big green flag. Oh, they get it.
Mm.
You know, these are filmmakers who pay attention to all the senses, not just the visual, and
right?
Not just a movie about actors standing around shouting at each other. Like they want to do movies where there is a flat sensorial hierarchy. You know, That's what I want. Where the sound is as important as the performance, is as important as the editing, is as important as the visuals. That try to the whole thing as a integrated experience. That's what I want to do. Use all the tools and do them enmeshed.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a flavor on top, but everything should be enmeshed. That's the goal.
Yeah. Now, did you know Graham or have him in mind, or did he come upon it, in the course of sort of putting it together?
Came upon us through Daniel Noah, the great connector.
He is good at that.
Daniel, you've worked with Graham forever, right? How did you first start working with him?
Gosh, I don't remember. How did we meet, Graham? You've been in my life so long. I don't even.
Yeah, through a film that I was going to direct, that Elijah was going to star in.
Of course, of course. Oh, Jesus, right. Yeah.
That we tried to get made for years, but we ended up working on a number of different projects over the years together. And since I do a lot of sound design along with writing and directing, I've just sort of naturally been brought into different things and some of the podcast work that we've done. And, I have some thoughts about the script and the sound in the script, but I'm curious to bridge the gap before I comment on that. Daniel, your reading of the script from Bryn and I assume you thought of me because I'm the greatest person to think of, but I'm just kind of curious.
And so,
why? Look,
Never,
I'm a sound designer here.
I've got so confident in my life. I love it.
This is like a Graham 2.0.
He's a very humble, sweet guy. I love to hear it. You are amazing.
But I appreciate that. But Tim, you brought up the script, and Bryn's approach to writing a script is very unique. And I think there's a really interesting narrative of how Daniel approached it and then how I approached it. So yeah, I'm Daniel, turning over the mic to you for this.
What was the question? How you came into the situation, or what?
I think he shifted it to how you came into the situation.
Yes.
So your feelings on the incorporation of sound and how you ended up bringing Graham in then.
Well, so I guess I'll first start by saying this came into our consciousness in the form of a deck that Bryn had made with a graphic designer, and that was passed to us by Lisa Yaris, who is a producer that we've worked with many times in the capacity of line producer, but she very sweet. I mean, she's a member of our family, and she very sweetly said, I've never passed you a project before, though I'm asked constantly, I think you will want to see this one. And so we said, of course, anything. Elijah and I read this deck, and we were like, we're in. It almost felt like someone had designed a movie just to cater to our highly specific constellation of interests and proclivities. So, I'm sound obsessed. And in fact, I've often said, this is maybe slightly controversial or maybe not, that I believe that sound is the more dominant factor of cinema than image. I think it's more powerful. And something that I've heard Bryn say as well is the test of this is that if you're watching a scary movie and you cover your eyes, it doesn't help. If you plug your ears, the film loses all of its power. Where I came to this was in part being raised in a family of musicians who were just all sound oriented, and the hi-fi was on more often than the television. And, like putting a record on was a big ceremonial thing. Here it is. And my grandfather, who kind of indoctrinated me into the arts, introduced me very early to Ken Nordine and, Orson Welles' Mercury Theater on the Air, and Boris Karloff. I can't remember the name of his millions of different horror radio shows. But then a very funny thing happened, which is that as a teenager in the 80s, maybe 3 of the 4 of us remember this, that there was a time when a movie that you liked left the theaters, it was years before you could see it again.
Yeah.
So I developed this practice of smuggling a small cassette recorder into the film. And because when I loved a movie, yeah.
Wow.
Really? Have we talked about this before?
I don't think so, but I've done that. Yeah,
Do you still have your tapes?
somewhere.
Yeah, me too.
Wow.
Yeah. The crown jewel of my collection was Silence of the Lambs, which has unbelievable sound design on it. I'm going to sound like a cranky old man here, but when we were growing up, there were no options. There weren't, now you can watch anything at a moment's notice and nobody seems to want to watch anything. But back then it was like, if there was 1 or 2 movies playing for 6 months, and if you liked that movie, you would literally go every weekend and see that movie. And so, I would start to memorize these films, and then eventually I would make these recordings. And I had this library of sound recordings of movies that I would play. I had a stereo in my bedroom, and I would literally put Silence of the Lambs on, and I would listen to the entire film. And I started to realize that it was almost as powerful as watching the movie. In some ways more, because, I was alone with my visual imagery. And so that got me, I think this is sort of like a series of things that made me very sound focused. I also had this habit for a very long time, which I've had people object to, and I'll have to say, for the record, I no longer do it, but I used to record my life. So when iPhones first started to have somewhat decent microphones, I would just hit record on the little voicemail thing. I would drop it into my shirt pocket, and I would just record several hours of my interactions throughout the day, because I've just found that there was something so uniquely immersive and intimate about being a fly on the wall, listening to people's candid conversations, inclusive of the silences. There's something magical about just listening to people have quiet.
The first town I lived in Pennsylvania is this little magical fairy tale looking place called Glen Rock. I absolutely love it. And I used to walk around there at night and record my walks alone. Yeah. I'm not speaking. I would record them on cassette, and I would listen back to them, and there was something so compelling about it. Just as you're just walking through town, and I would hear, you hear a dog barking in the distance. You pass like somebody's air conditioner. There's something about it though that was so compelling, and I remember thinking, anyone else in the world who listens to this is not going to get it. Like, yeah. Like, what do I do with it?
I would, yeah. I think, Graham, you might remember these. I used to do these events in LA I called it the Active Listening Project. And I would rent a theater, and I would invite a bunch of very confused, frightened people. and I would kill the lights to as dark as you could get the room. And I would play a 45 to 60 minute build of just immersive sound. So it would range from field recordings that I captured myself to bits of music to just strange found recordings. And the idea was that there's nothing intellectual to like hook onto. It was a purely experiential encounter, which I learned a tremendous amount about storytelling from this, because what I started to understand, and I did this back in the days when my job was as a screenwriter, so I was just thinking about narrative all the time. And what I started to understand is, a story, a plot, is merely representations of emotional states. So you could almost think of it as like layers of earth, right? And that the plot of who needs to be where, when with the microfilm is that's what a plot is, right? It's the boring parts that you unfortunately have to have. Well, not everybody does. And then the story is what's the next level. The plot represents the story, and the story is like the people's psychological dynamics, but even that has a lower level, that it represents just simply the primordial experience of just raw emotion, and that you could track a story on that level. There's this great little legend, I don't know if it's true, that the filmmaker Mike Figgis, whenever he's getting ready to lock an edit or a script, that he literally translates his story into musical notation, and he puts the whole thing up on a wall because he wants to track the emotional experience, or I'm not sure if emotion is even the right word here, but so through this project, I just started learning about how you can carry someone through a movie by being attentive to the ups and downs and vagaries and patterns of the just pure emotional element. And anyway, this is an extremely long, excited answer to your question, which was that, a movie about sound was, to me, like, I couldn't even believe. I'd been waiting for this my whole career. And then you have already surmised by talking to Bryn for 20 minutes, you could just tell from reading the material that this came from someone who was not faking his way through these ideas. He really lived them, and they were coming from an incredibly authentic place within him. Yeah, he had us at hello. I couldn't wait to get Graham on this, because though Graham is very selective about what he sound designs now, because he's does many things as a filmmaker, and he writes award-winning video games. And I was like, man, this is going to be, if he's going to come out of retirement for something, it's going to be this.
Well, Graham,
been pegged
there. So these are, essentially what I call the other, is sort of this blanket term I use for the paranormal in general. So how do you prepare, to make sounds that are coming from the other? Like, it seems like a lot of fun, like it's like something to be thrown in your lap, like this is going to be fun, but also how do you like say like, I need to make this a certain way and it needs to sound blank,
Great question. And you hit on something there that, to jump off of what Daniel said, I'm fairly selective about what I choose to sound design, in part because it's a very time consuming process. It can take 6 months to a year sometimes. And I'd say this film took, from beginning to end of our first chunk of sound design, which started before production, about 6 months, 3 really intense months in post, but 3 months leading up. So it really has to be something that is going to be fun, and that I'm going to get along with the people that I'm working with. And as soon as I met Bryn, I was like, he's got his heart in the right place with this, and he wants to do all these things that I would like to do. And, I love Spectrovision and Daniel and all. So all the pieces were there for me. And in reading Bryn's script, there's something you're not supposed to do in screenplay, right? In screenwriting, which is you're not supposed to direct on the page. Which is stupid. I fully disagree with that. And it's an old thing, I'm sure Daniel knows more about this. It's when you're selling screenplays, you're not supposed to direct on the page because you don't want to offend the director or, put ideas in their head. But a screenplay should be, a first draft of what the film is, and it should imply all the things that a film can do. And all of the tools that are part of filmmaking include sound and everything else that a director does. So I absolutely think you should direct on the page personally. And I think when Bryn did it, he did something that I found really inspiring and also insanely daunting. And I don't think I've ever told you this, Bryn, but when I read your script, I was shaking my head literally out of both out of like being blown away by your specificity and vagueness in the poetic way that you would describe sounds. It would be like a list of words like bugs, grass, wind, loam, salt. And I would just be like, oh no, this is like, I see fireworks going off in my brain, but how will I ever match what Bryn has done here or live up to it? Luckily, the viewers of the film aren't reading Bryn's script. They're just watching the film. So they don't have that to live up to. They don't, have to compare. But it set a precedent for me, which was, all right, we're going to try to achieve things in the sound design. We're going to try to push audio to a place that we don't usually get to hear in films. And one of the things with sound is that, like, there are so many different things you can do. It's almost like you have too much, you have too much power at your hands with sound and in films. You can manipulate audiences. You can make use of the spectrum, the frequency spectrum, in all sorts of ways to subtly infuse ideas and infuse feelings into an audience. And you have to be very careful with that. I always look for thematic, and I look for rules that we can break if we want, but rules that can at least sort of guide us towards motifs and things.
Not to interrupt you, but I know, so my best albums that I've done over the years, in my opinion, were ones that I set up parameters for myself. Now, not parameters that I couldn't break. I can break them if I want to, but it was just like one album I did. I said, I'm just going to use one banjo, this one banjo from the 1800s. I sang through the head. I bowed it. I played it in ways you were not supposed to play it, beat on it like a drum, but it was all one banjo. And it was one of the most creative things I did because I kind of set those parameters,
Totally. And I mean, I think, we were talking about before with the time frame of the film, the time period, and going off of that as a first jumping off point was like immediately like, okay, well, we can shrink it to, it's just these kinds of sounds, these kind of instruments, these kind of techniques, nothing digital sounding. Everything has to feel organic and electrical, not necessarily electronic, but electrical.
Right.
And then also in our first conversations, Bryn and I were talking about, to some degree, the occult ideas and the supernatural ideas in the film, to which I have my own baggage and my own ideas about. And to me, there's like, that we have our reality and then there's another reality. And it's sort of in the way that Bryn's talking about fairies being kind of hard to pin down. I tend to think of it as like a third rail. You break through and it's like it can electrify you, it can kill you, it can reinvigorate you. So for me, the most important thing, since that's so unknowable, is the barrier. And I think, Bryn, out of one of our very first conversations, we talked about the ferrite barrier, the magnetic tape being this membrane between the two spaces. And that became the other big guiding principle for me. So anything that was coming or influenced by this third rail on the other side, which could include the child, could include, fairy folk, it could, be whatever, it had to be infused through the ferrite barrier. So it had to come through magnetic tape in some way. And so magnetic tape was a huge, huge part of the design work in the film. Almost everything was recorded to reel or cassette tape and then manipulated in some way beyond that. But just having that barrier was like, okay, now I know what I have to do with any piece of audio.
It has been one of my ongoing theories as regards the paranormal, and in my experience, this is at least somewhat true. It's been true for me anyway, that we are not allowed to record video. That's why you're In my opinion, you're never going to get a clear photo of Bigfoot. You're never going to get a really clear ghost. UFOs, I mean, they're just lights, you know? I think it's more possible. I think light may be the essential form of the phenomenon before it takes any other form. So I think you got a better chance of capturing lights than anything else. But I really don't think, it's almost like we're not allowed to take pictures, but we are allowed to record audio. Have you ever heard, Graham, the Sierra sounds? Are you familiar with those?
I'm not. What is it?
These are sounds that two fellows recorded in the very early 1970s on a crappy cassette recorder in the Sierra Mountains of what is supposed to be Bigfoot. And it is some of the most amazing audio that you will ever hear as far as paranormal audio. It has been listened to by cryptolinguists, and they say it is a language being spoken. They cannot tell what's being said, but it is a language. Now, they say it's Bigfoot. They were seeing Bigfoot around and they were hearing these sounds. I don't believe they ever saw the creatures like making the sounds. So it could be, anything else. We're talking about the paranormal here, but it's pretty incredible. But I always use that as like an example of like the peak of paranormal evidence is this audio recorded, in the early 1970s in the Sierra Mountains. But there's this line in the film that speaks to this. And I don't know, Bryn, if this was intentional, if this was something you heard somewhere else. And I might misquote it, but I think it's through your eyes you enter the world, and through your ears the world enters you. I thought it was brilliant, and it really speaks. To my mind, it kind of solidified this idea that I've been having about like, audio is somehow the way to document this.
Yeah, I think I listened to one of your episodes earlier today where you were interviewing Brother Richard, and he was talking about fairy folk of Ireland, and he was saying about if you go out and try to have an experience or encounter fair folk or any sort of otherworldly being, you're doing it wrong. Like, you're not meant to go out there and grab it. You're not meant to go out and kind of hunt it down. It doesn't want to be hunted. It will come to you. They will come to you if and when they feel like it, and they will, reveal themselves on their own terms. And I think that really speaks to what we're talking about. Well, because with your eyes, you kind of hunt. You go out and you look. With your ears, it's more kind of a receptive quality. You're actually, it's a pun with a movie, you're trapping. It's more of a trap than a spear. The eyes are a spear and the ears are a trap. They're just left open for whatever wants to wander in. And so it's, I think it probably does make sense if that's the rule. I don't know if that is the rule.
Yeah, it's just my theory.
Record sound.
Yeah.
It's because, I like it because what you're doing is it's an open hand. The ear is an open hand to whatever wants to fly in, and so that means you're allowing it to be on their terms. So maybe that's it. And that's kind of the principle of the movie as well. Like there's another scene where the child is demonstrating to Darcy how a rabbit trap works, and he says, like, if you want to trap a rabbit or any creature, you need to know what it's hungry for, and that's what you offer it as a gift. You have to mean it. And then he sort of demonstrates that it will smell the bait and it will come and it will enter your trap. And it's kind of like an exchange that is reciprocal. So, I like the idea that the supernatural is, you just need to wait for it to come to you.
And I'd also say, I was really inspired by that line too when I first came across it in the movie. And one of the things about sound that is sort of a given, it's an obvious thing, but we don't think about it that much. But in this context, you don't see with your whole body, but you hear with your whole body. You don't just hear with your ears. You feel vibrations, and sound is very physical, and it actually alters you physically when you hear it. And that's something that I think, is just ties directly into that line and that idea of something happening to you when you hear a sound.
Bryn, is that a wholly original line on your part, or did elements of that?
No. So I went to film school in Australia from 2004 to 2006, and one semester was a sound design class that I loved. And so aside from directing, I really loved doing sound design. And I had this lecturer, and unfortunately I've forgotten his name, and I've tried to find him. I tried to find what his name was and see where he got this line, but that was something he said to us, I think, on the first day of sound design class. It was like, with your eyes, you enter the world, and with your ears, the world enters you. And then he went on to describe about Star Wars and the ship flying over and how effective sound is for that and so on. But it was kind of a throwaway thing he said, and it really struck me, and that was nearly 20 years ago. And I've Googled it since and looked around, and I cannot find anyone else who said that line.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to attribute it to my anonymous sound design teacher from 2004.
I have a feeling you'll be hearing it quoted on Strange Familiars quite a bit going forward. It's
oh, really cool.
Absolutely fantastic.
Take it. So
back to you, Graham. How much did you try to stay in the analog realm, given that this is set in the 1970s?
Well, we've come a long way with post-production audio. Sure. Making music on analog tape is one thing, but it's nearly impossible to do for film. I mean, I've never even really tried in terms of like putting the actual film together. So really, for me, analog was a way to create material. Everything else was built and mixed and processed eventually in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
But, I almost all of the big ticket sequences in the film have a huge percentage of analog material created in them, whether it's the reel-to-reel or, little hand-cracked tape transport or speed modded cassette Walkman that I, worked on, and you can just kind of ramp the speed up and down. And then even like the opening monologue of the child that, you see an oscilloscope reacting to her words. I think, Bryn, we probably spent more time on that sequence than maybe any other sequence in the film. We recorded that to tape, to reel-to-reel, and then manipulated the reel-to-reel as we were playing it back, and layered that maybe like 15 times. And we would go through and just pick syllables from one of the manipulations and then mix it with a little syllable from another manipulation. So it's heavily processed. And all of the voiceover in the film pretty much was run to tape at some point, and then back.
And also, I mean, it was fun to watch Graham use organic materials to create sounds. I mean, his beard makes a lot of apperances in the sound. There's microphones through it.
There's an armpit scene that might have a little beard in it.
In bed. And Rosie grew her armpit hair out as best she could in time with the shoot, and she was and I was like, yes, he did it. So there's a scene where the character where Darcy runs a microphone over her armpit hair, and in the film it's actually Graham's thick beard. It fits. Rosie was.
There you go. I'm so sorry, Rosie.
In Graham's studio, he hooked up mushrooms to some of his gadgets to try to capture how moisture is affecting the electrical currents, and he did some kind of Tibetan throat or Mongolian throat warbling at some point. What was it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's a recording actually from a very long time ago that I've used in different projects, but on this project, we manipulated it in a unique way. I had a cold in 2007. That's the title of my autobiography. I had a cold in 2007, and my voice was very deep, way deeper than it should have been. And I used this microphone on my throat and just did some groaning, long, extended groaning, layered it 20, 30 times. And I've used it in a lot of movies, House of the Devil, a lot of other things. But for this, I slowed it down 50 times. Then we recorded it to tape, and then I manipulated it. So a lot of it was supposed to represent the sound of the sort of churning earth, soil crumbling and moving underneath you. So you hear it kind of bubble up at different times. And then,
the great earth phlegm.
Yes, the earth phlegm.
Yeah. And that's also the analog sensibility and kind of equipment was also true of the music. That was done by Lucrecia Dalt, who's a Colombian musician and composer. And she came on really early, long before we shot the movie, because there were sequences that had to be composed for Rosie to perform on set, and also to define the kind of overall sound and tone of the film. The music was so vital. So she traveled around because she was touring with an album around Europe, and she would drop in in Switzerland. She was in Switzerland, and there was a museum of Buchla synthesizers. So she would drop in there and record some Buchlas. And then next time she traveled, she went to a place that had some different gear. And over the course of a year, she was able to piece together bits of tones and music, all recorded on period specific gear, which she then could create and layer and structure. And then when she created music, designing it for the edit later on, she still used gear that would have been used all the way up until 1976, where the film is set. I don't think there are any instruments from after that, actually. And a lot of it's voice and cello mixed with those electronic instruments.
Speaking of soundtracks and movies and the importance of sound, I'm assuming everyone here is familiar with Night of the Hunter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
My favorite movie of all time.
Wow.
Are you familiar with the soundtrack?
What, do you mean the score or just the sound?
Well, what they released as the soundtrack to it.
No.
Cool. No.
So that was, and I always draw a blank on the director's name, but it's the director telling the story of the film. So it's not a straight just the soundtrack. It's the director telling the story of the film with sounds of the film incorporated, and it's
my God,
incredible. And I beg you to do that with this film.
Okay, cool. That's a bit. What was this? He was Charles Lawton,
yes.
right? Was
yeah.
It, yeah.
The only film
He was an
directed,
actor. It was the only film he directed.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's cool because like the movie is kind of I see that film talked about mostly because of the cinematography. You know that the images are kind of so special, but it's great that I've never heard it talked about with being in a sound forward way.
If you ever get a chance, like somebody did a CD release ages ago, which I was lucky enough to find, but the original LP you can find here and there, and you just like, oh, Night of the Hunter soundtrack. What's it going to be like? You know, the cinematic score or whatever. But you play it, and it's literally the story, and then the sounds incorporated. It is amazing.
Cool.
It's one of my favorite things to listen to. Absolutely love it. When you were talking about recording films, Daniel, that's kind of what immediately came to mind. It's like, oh, that Night of the Hunter thing.
It's on YouTube. Well, only 20 minutes of it though. But yeah, and it's restored. There's a 20-minute restored section of it on YouTube. Yeah.
You know, being as this is a paranormal podcast, and without getting too far in the weeds, for each of you, and you can go in any order, have you had any paranormal experiences yourself?
Oh, Tim. Abstain from this one.
You can't. You're the guy. I mean, have you actually been on this podcast before and talked about your paranormal experiences?
I don't think I have. Have I? No.
And I know there's a few with you, Daniel. So you know.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a whole other episode on that one, maybe. But
yeah, you've had Bigfoot, you've had ghosts.
I don't know that I've had fairies. I mean, the only possibility is, I guess maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago, Ariel and I rented a little cabin up in Russian River, and it was off season. So there was no one there. I mean, it was really very spooky. There are all these little houses, these homes that run along the Russian River. And, you know, as we're entering, we're like, there's no cars in the driveways. There's no lights on. I think it might've been Thanksgiving weekend. So we were truly alone here. And I often will, when we're out in a strange place, we'll just pick up a little Zoom recorder and just hit record and just run it all night because, you know, things happen and you're like, you know, you're scrambling to hit record and you miss it, you know, but now, of course, the trickstery element of this is when you're recording, nothing happens, but it did this time. And Bryn has heard all about this, but out of the woods was a little melodic phrase played on a flute. Just came out of the woods. And I have the recording of it. This incredibly haunting little melody that I've never been able to identify. And, you know, we started rationalizing there could be another cabin on the other side of the river. And maybe whoever is there just doesn't turn the lights on. And then also at 3 a.m, they decided to step outside with their flute and just play like 7 notes. That's possible, right? You can't rule that out.
Right. Sure.
But it felt very strange. And that's the only kind of fae-like experience that I've ever had. But it's all the same stuff with different names.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Lots of American, you know, little people have flutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry. So I cut you off. Lots of American
little people,
sightings.
No, like the legends of them say they carry flutes and they use them to lure people off into the forest.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Tim, I'll send you that recording. Maybe I actually realized that I've never really tried to clean it up because the rush of the river is kind of blanketing it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could dig the flute sound out a little bit.
I'd love to try.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Bryn, other than sort of growing up with this folklore, have you had any which you feel are sort of direct experiences?
I wouldn't say so, no. And actually, listening to that interview you did with Brother Richard actually gave me a bit of comfort in the way that he said, the paranormal or the other, if there are beings on the other side, that they will come to you if they want to be known. You don't go and get them yourself, and they're not going to reveal themselves to everyone, or maybe only once in a fleeting moment. And I found that a bit comforting because part of me, whenever I go in the woods, I'm kind of listening and looking and kind of, I'm aware that part of me believes in fairies and goblins and pixies and sprites. Part of me also has believed in those things. So I think I'm conscious of looking for them, which is exactly the wrong thing to do.
It's exactly the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I have all sorts of perspectives on this. I'm going to share a few of them. That's okay.
Yeah.
And Tim, chime in anytime here. I think that part of this is literally vibrational. I think that humans have like some kind of current vibrating through us. I mean, there's actually a term for this, right? What is it? Because we have electricity in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what it's called?
No.
Okay. But it is my belief, insofar as we're able to apply scientific method to this stuff, that a lot of the paranormal, it does exist somewhere in like the electromagnetic spectrum. And I think that there are certain human beings who, for whatever reason, this element of their physiology is a little more cranked. Mm-hmm. And I think those people are both the people who are able to perceive other events that are taking place on that vibrational level, and also attract entities that are existing in that realm. So it's a mix. You either are born that way or you're not. That being said, there are ways you can tune up that element of your physiology through meditation, prayer, drugs. The one way to assuredly not do it is through the intellect, which is what happens when a lot of people I know who are either skeptics or like you, they're like, whenever I hear someone say, I want to believe, I always know you're never going to experience anything. I don't know anyone who has said that who has had an experience, because the problem with it is that there's an element of, first of all, it's intellectual. There's an element of prove it that no entity is ever going to prove anything to you, but right. But it is, I think the best way to actually try, like proactively try, is to go deliberately into places where you feel fear and force yourself to be quietly existent in that space. I think that's when things happen. That's my intuitive feeling about it.
We've had great luck when we go to these haunted places or places, where people have seen Bigfoot or whatever, and don't try to do the thing. In other words, three of us, for some reason, I have good luck, 3 people, and you get there and you take a walk and you start talking about your life. And you're not talking about the paranormal. You're just talking about what's going on in your life, maybe what's some thoughts you've had, what's bothering you, what's upsetting you. And then things start firing off. Like we've had that.
That's so interesting. But Tim, it's funny because before we even knew each other, years before we even knew each other, because I've been such a big fan of your show for so long, I actually used a tactic that I learned from you, which was that you talked about how sometimes when you go to a place that feels like maybe it's got something going on, you introduce yourself and you make a request.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so I tried that. I remember hearing you say that, and it was also at an Airbnb over Thanksgiving, because my wife and I like to do, it's a fun time to go on adventures during Thanksgiving, because you always have, wherever you are, you've got the place to yourself. we were up. I'm forgetting the name of the mountain, but we were in a very, very, very elevated, like 7,000 feet on a mountaintop, completely alone in somewhere in mid coast California. And we stepped out under the deck, which was in the woods, which was just immediately under the canopy of sky, and because we were at the highest point. And I felt like an idiot, but I said loudly, "Hello, my name is Daniel, and I would like to see an orb tonight." Because at that time I had never seen an orb. Now I've seen many of them. But about 45 minutes later, this huge, like beach ball size white orb, just for a second, it just popped up in the trees. And I found that miraculous, that it actually gave me the exact thing I asked for, the exact thing.
Look, I think this is available to all of us. And I say this on the show often, but I think it bears repeating. None of us have magical powers. Like, this is available to everyone. But I think it may be like art or music or these others. Like, and I always use myself as an example. Art, I can always do it, always could do it. I can put my drawing tools away for a year and pick them up again, and I'm right where I was when I left off. But music, I have to practice. And if I stop practicing, I start losing it. Difference between a sort of a gift and a developed talent. And I think some people have the gift, genetically or however it is. And this stuff is just going to happen more easily to them. Other people, you're going to have to develop it. And that means you're going to have to go to these haunted places, and you're going to have to put yourself there, and you might have to do it a lot before something happens.
Yeah. I want to also say, Bryn, that I think that you actually have had an incredibly profound and undeniable paranormal experience that you're not recognizing as such. And it's the way that you received the story Rabbit Trap and channeled it through your body and brought it into the world. That is a supernatural event as far as I'm concerned, because you're a fairly young man who you have no earthly business writing that story. Like so, and I've often said that the act of creation is paranormal, is supernatural. So I think you've had a major supernatural event happen in your life, at least one.
Maybe. You could be right. In Welsh tradition, there's this idea called Arwen, Arwen, which is their word for inspiration and also spirit and also knowledge and also madness. And the people who would receive this Arwen there's in the Roman history books, they're describing about they call them the Druids, these bards who would receive this kind of divine inspiration, and they would just start singing, and they would be frothing at the mouth, and they'd be in a lunatic kind of hysterical state where they have this divine inspiration, but it manifested as music. And I think that's very interesting. The kind of link between lunacy and inspiration and the spirit and art, because I felt like I went a bit mad writing this film, and there were times where I just felt like I was channeling some part of myself that I wasn't aware of. This is a very personal film, and it's really like about parts of my unconscious that I was inviting to reveal itself, because I don't want to get too personal, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that I had pushed, but I knew was there. And in writing the film, I was inviting them to come up. So there are whole sequences of the film which I wrote almost like automatic writing, where it just
wow.
And there's one sequence right at the end, which is the sequence that I think has most divided people, where the story switches fully into fable mode, and our characters spontaneously start sharing a fable which actually summarizes and I think solves the film's entire emotional message or function. And the characters are having this almost like a shamanic experience where it's coming out. And that was, for me, the way I wrote it. It came out in one go, in one session, and I didn't have to edit it. In the edit room, we ended up chopping a couple of paragraphs out, but nothing got rearranged or rewritten. That's an interesting experience to me, because that felt like something close to what these bards of Arwen would kind of touch, where it was possibly madness or possibly something on the inside that needed out. And to the exterior, other people, it looks like you've lost your mind. And actually, a lot of people have felt like that part of the film. What the f- have you done? You've lost your mind. This is not how you end a movie. This is terrible. But it felt completely right to do it that way.
No, I think I can't. I mean, look, I've seen the movie. I can't think of another way to end it. It felt like the way to sort of tie it together. I don't know. It felt right to me that way.
Me too. I'm glad you're on the boat.
And I think creativity is tied to this. It's obviously tied to this. From people who have never done anything creative in their life, and they have these intense UFO encounters, and all of a sudden they're painting pictures and writing stories and doing all this stuff. Somehow, I can't say exactly how, but it is tied to this. And many people who are already creative are the people that are having these experiences.
One of the things, like clues on this subject, that I find incredibly fascinating is the year 1977, because a few things happened in 1977. One was that Charles and Ray Eames made a film called Powers of 10, which is a science movie that it was a short, I mean, it's maybe 12 minutes. I'm sure I've forced it on both of these guys at some point because I'm obsessed with it. It's just a bird's eye view of a couple on a picnic blanket in Chicago, and it pulls back by powers of 10 until it's at the outer reaches of the cosmos. It goes as far as we are aware of how things work. And then it goes plunging back down to Earth, and it goes into the pores on the man's hand. And then it goes into the inner verse as far as we're able to detect. And what's so accidentally fascinating about this, to me, what is actually like kind of a work of philosophy, is that the way things look all the way on the outside and the way they look all the way on the inside are almost identical. Right? Like the galaxies and planets and constellations that look like protons and electrons. And so it's this idea of as above, so below. And I bring this up in this context to say that when you're in a state of flow and you have that automatic writing feeling, when you come out of it, there's always the question of where did that come from? Did it come from within or without? And my theory is that's the same thing. Right. Like if you go plummet into the depths of your unconscious, just as a clock face, if you follow the minute, the hands of a clock, eventually you come back to exactly where you started. If you can see forever, you see the back of your own head. Like everything's ultimately a circle. Mm-hmm. And so what's inside is outside. What's outside is inside. There's no differentiation. 1977 is also the year that Philip K. Dick gave his talk at the literary conference in Paris, where he terrified everyone by saying, I'm not going to give a talk on science fiction. I'm here to make an announcement. I have realized that my stories are real. They've been given to me by entities from other realms. They are representations of events taking place in alternate timelines. And the reason I know this is that one of my characters came to my house. Mm-hmm. I realize that most of you will say that I'm insane, but I also believe that I am far from the first person to realize this and just the first person to talk about it, right? So everybody went, oh, the man is schizophrenic. And maybe he was. But I also think that what he said was probably true, to your point, Bryn, about, there's madness. It's kind of indistinguishable from tapping into a source when you're
sacred or something. I mean, I don't think I've told you this before, but I mean, the only Philip K. Dick book I've ever read was Valis.
Yeah,
and
that's read that one.
And I read that when I was maybe 16.
Wow.
15, 16. I read it on a flight from Australia to England when my parents had just broken up, and then we moved back to England to live with my grandparents. And I read Valis on the plane, and it did a real number on me. It made so much sense. Now, Graham, who's a big Philip K. Dick fan, has explained to me that there's a whole satirical undercurrent to it, and it's a metafiction that I didn't clock at all. I just read it as a supernatural confession kind of adventure.
Satire being part of it, but it's also referencing his entire body of work. So I think there's
Exactly.
but it is interesting that it had that profound effect on you without having the awareness of his.
Yeah, probably means I didn't read it very deeply, but at the time it did really strike me as something that made sense also to me as a teenager who was also struggling with certain kind of mental health problems, that the line between insanity and the sacred or the sublime is a hazy one or is an adventurous one or something, I don't know, and I didn't want to judge the difference between the two. So I think it has, that Philip K. Dick era actually has influenced my writing probably quite a lot. It was quite comforting to me as a quite mad teenager, that, what if this madness is actually touching something true, even if it's just true on a realm that I don't live in. That's comforting.
So Graham, the supernatural question comes to you. Direct experiences?
I have had experiences, but I don't think they're I don't know. Everybody seems to have their own different, unique kinds of relationship to the beyond space. Mine, I think the most profound ones that I've had in my life have to do with things aligning in a particular way that shouldn't have happened or seem so improbable that I can't believe, my either luck or, fortune to find myself in a position to then have the right tools at the right moment to say, okay, I know how to do this. But I also, I was trying to think about this when Daniel was bringing up his experience, and I do have one experience that I don't know that I've ever talked about, but it's not exactly an encounter as much as it is something that I can't explain that had a profound impact on me over the past 24 years exactly or so. Right after September 11th, I'd been living in New York. I went to Delaware for a few days once I could leave the city. Obviously very shaken. I was in college and it was a rough time. I had been driving down from Wilmington, where my parents lived, down to Newark, 20-minute drive. And I had some friends at the university town there and was hanging out with them, reading Robert Wilson comics. And it's just like, doing stuff that I just really needed to do to kind of reset my, but I was also struggling with, I was in film school and I, at that point it was like, well, is the world falling apart? Everyone was very catastrophic at that, or catastrophizing at that moment. And a lot of people were questioning whether or not they should stay in film or they should continue doing what they're doing. And I remember one evening I was down there visiting a friend of mine and I got in my car at like 2 a.m. to drive back to my parents' house. And I just started, my mind was sort of drifting. I wasn't even really that tired. And I was coming up and I realized I was about to run a red light. And I realized I could see right in front of me, there was a car coming out of a parking lot through the light and I was going to hit it. And there was no way for me to brake in time. Just none. And I was like, oh no. And I remembered closing my eyes and braking and bracing my whole body and then opening my eyes a second or two later. And I was on the other side of the intersection, no one around, and there was no car, nothing. And it was the most striking, weirdest feeling because I wasn't under any influence. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't tired. There was a car there and they had nowhere to go. There was nowhere around. I mean, cars don't just disappear. And it just felt to me like I had just been kind of shifted away from where there was a car. And I was now in a place where there was no car. And I've always kind of thought of that as a moment where I think about it a lot because sometimes I think to myself, well, I should only do the things that I want to do because I have this opportunity to not be dead. And, it's a typical near-death experience kind of thing. But I was pushed into this space where I should only do the things I want to do in terms of art, in terms of creation, and shouldn't compromise on that because I was given this opportunity. Like that was the universe way of saying like, we're going to give you this chance. Don't fuck it up.
Wow. That's a very neat takeaway from that. So I don't want to keep you guys for too long, but I have a question I ask every guest that I would love to. So here is the question, and it comes from a real account from UFO history, if you're not familiar with it. On the morning of April 18th, 1961, Joe Simonton saw a silver disc on his farm. He went out, investigated, and stepped aboard the craft. There he encountered 3 dark-skinned humanoids who handed him an empty jug. Joe filled it with water and brought it back for them. In return, they gave him some pancakes. The question is, would you eat the pancakes? Starting with Bryn, go ahead. There's a very kind of fae thing. Like, would you eat the pancakes?
Okay. Yeah, I think by that point, the pancakes are one of the least weird things going on. Yeah, I'd eat the pancakes. Sure.
That's like being offered food from the fae, you know?
Yeah, I know, it's true. And actually, the food from the fae is fine. You know, they'll give you bread and cheese and things. It's when you tell people that they gave you the food, that's when it turns into dust in your mouth, or when you become dust.
Interesting.
It's so much about being a private experience. So maybe the answer I should have given is that yes, but I wouldn't tell anyone about it.
So Daniel, to you, would you eat the pancakes?
No. No, but I would bring them to a lab.
Do you know this story? Are you familiar with this story?
Yeah.
So they were brought to a lab, and they found
it was all terrestrial ingredients, right?
Yeah,
and they were also really bland. Yes, no salt.
No salt. Yeah. Graham, are you eating the pancakes?
No, my wife offers me pancakes every weekend when our kid has friends over and stuff, and I always say no, and I've never understood why, but now I do.
They still have, apparently the Air Force says they still have one of these pancakes.
Yeah.
Somewhere. So very, very interesting. Rabbit Trap, fantastic film. It gets really my highest recommendation for people who are interested in the paranormal and just movies in general. I think you guys all did a great job. It's amazing. I really love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on Strange Familiars.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this has been great. It's been great fun. Thank you so much for having us.
Strange Familiars is brought to you by our patrons. Everyone likes extra content, don't they, Alison?
I would assume so.
If you like Strange Familiars and you want to get more Strange Familiars, a good way to do that is to become a patron. Go to patreon.com/strangefamiliars. Our patrons get commercial-free versions of the weekly shows, plus extra episodes every month. People might be wondering where episode 550 was. That's a patron show. So that's one of the shows that we do just for our patrons. They're full-length shows, and we do at least one every month. Sometimes we do 2. For more information, go to patreon.com/strangefamiliars. Our Patreon patrons also get to participate in an ongoing paranormal experiment, which has kicked off already, and it is in full swing, and it is very exciting, some of the things we're getting, but it's not too late to join. You can jump in on that at any time you become a patron. Once again, patreon.com/strangefamiliars for more. There's also an option via Apple Podcasts. Our Apple Podcast subscribers get the commercial-free shows weekly and the extra shows monthly. And very soon we'll be activating YouTube memberships. You can subscribe to our channel on YouTube for free, and please do that no matter where you listen. That helps us out. So please subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Just look up Strange Familiars, you'll find us. But we'll activate memberships coming up, and our YouTube members will be able to get the bonus shows monthly as well. And I'd like to thank our patrons no matter where they're signed up. It is a huge help. Thank you so much. Once again, Rabbit Trap is in theaters this Friday, the 12th. Gets my highest recommendation. It is a film that tackles the other in a way that feels right. And speaking of fairies, Alison, you've brought us a pretty fairy.
Yeah.
Of the Victorian Tinkerbell type.
I wouldn't say Tinkerbell. I'd just say like fun on a Saturday night kind of fairy.
Fun on a Saturday night fairy.
Yeah.
So this is a reprint of one of our postcards that we collected. This is a one-of-a-kind print. It's a fairy. Oh, the spiderweb in the background, too.
Yeah. I had a thing for a while where I was
collecting spiderweb girls. So this is, do you know if this is 9x12?
Yeah, it's standard size. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 9x12.
It's 9x12 print, and it's one of a kind, printed on board, some kind of Do you know what that's called? Kind of acrylic board.
Yeah, I use it where I work to make exhibits. So it's the same kind of durable. It's not like foam core. It's a heavier.
Yeah, it's like an acrylic board.
Yeah, and it's printed directly onto that substrate,
really nice.
so you don't need glass on it. And you can just pop it in a frame.
So this is only one. Yeah, you can pop it right into a frame. It's ready to go. We didn't make a bunch of prints of this. Maybe we will someday, but for now, this is it. This is the only one. So that'll be in our Etsy shop, and that's our Curiosity of the Week this week. I'll put an image of that in the show notes, and if you click on that, it'll take you to our Etsy shop where you can purchase that and other Curiosities of the Week, those that are left. While you're on Etsy, you can check out our other offerings, artwork, prints, and originals, including the artwork for tonight's show, which I think you can tell I like the movie.
You do like, and it's a good bunny image too. I
Yeah,
really like.
well, any chance to draw a bunny is a good thing. So that's available there. My books are there. And if you get them from us on Etsy, I'll sign them before we pack them up. You don't even have to ask. Strange Familiars t-shirts, patches, stickers, and more. Allison has various old photos and other bits of ephemera there. Check it out. Our Etsy shop name is Lost Grave. But if you type in Strange Familiars in the search bar at Etsy, you should see our stuff come up. You can find our shop that way as well. There's also links in the show notes and at strangefamiliars.com. Riverbend Comics, riverbendcomics.com, I believe has a pre-order up for High Strangeness Comics 1 and 2, including cover B of High Strangeness Comics number 2, which is my cover. So if you want to run over there and pre-order that from Riverbend, you can. When it comes out, I'll have copies and, I'll be able to sign them and send them out as well. But if you want to pre-order and make sure you get one, riverbendcomics.com. And that's John, who you hear on the show often. And he can pretty much fill all your comic needs, new and old, usually. If he doesn't have it,
he knows exactly where to get it.
He knows where to get it, and you can give him a list of stuff you're looking for. Yeah, John's very, very good with that stuff. And coming up in October, I believe, John will be having some pretty cool horror sales on Whatnot, including some Vampirella and Eerie magazines from way back in the day, back in the 70s, I think 60s. I think Eerie started in the 60s. Super cool horror magazines. How do I know this? Because they're from my collection. So check out riverbendcomics.com for more and follow John on Whatnot. I'm sure he's Riverbend Comics there as well. Albatwitch Day. The location has been moved yet again.
For the better.
It's much, much better. Now, it had been moved from Columbia to Marietta, and the location was a neat location where it was going to be, but it wasn't a lot of parking there. They have moved it to another location that's right across from the overlook at Chickies Rock, so it's really appropriate place for Albatwitch Day, and there's plenty of parking. So Albatwitch Day is in full swing once more.
Albatwitch Day will be at the First Assembly of God, 4696 Brazy View Drive, Columbia, Pennsylvania, and that is a disused church, abandoned church.
Not really abandoned,
but it's no longer in commission, but they graciously, I guess, gave Chris the opportunity to use that. All of their land, which is much larger than where it was going to be previously.
And what's the date this year?
The date is Saturday, October 11th.
I thought so. Yeah.
From 11 a.m. to 5 p.m.
So we will be there. I am speaking at Albatwitch Day this year, and I have no clue what I'm talking about yet. I have to nail that down real soon here. There's other lecturers. There's, of course, vendors, music, everything.
And now much better parking and access to the whole place will be much easier.
Yeah.
The other place was scenic and cool, and I would have loved it on one level. But
right. Yeah, the other place looked cool, but parking was not going to be fun. This, plenty of parking.
Yeah, and
everybody's going to be there.
And it's across from Chickies Rock, right? So it's like...
Yeah, it's pretty much across from the overlook there. Yeah, so...
Yeah, and it's one of the sites of one of the original sites of an Albatwitch sighting, I guess.
Pretty close by, for sure.
So it's just, I mean, if you've been to Albatwitch before, it's just up the hill.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that much further.
No, not much further at all. Less than a mile, probably. Yeah. So
head up the hill. Great
location. I'm super excited about it. Not that I wasn't excited about it before, but I was like, oh, we're going to have to deal with parking and blah, blah, blah. So now it's all there. It's going to be great. So Albatwitch Day, October 11th, I will be speaking. that might be my only appearance this year because the thing in August got canceled. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I'm speaking at Carbondalian Festival again or not. So we'll see. Albatwitch Day might be it for me.
Yeah, and if you're coming to the Pennsylvania Historical Society convention, I'll be speaking there.
When and where is that?
Their convention is in York this year, hence my speaking.
Awesome. And you will be speaking on?
Haven't decided yet, but better decide soon. Kind of
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. It's probably going to be Bigfoot.
Probably.
Historical Bigfoot.
No,
it's not going to be that.
It's not going to be Bigfoot. But okay, well, cool.
I think you need to be a member to be in it.
Okay.
I have yet to become one myself, so I have to do that. Can't just bop in for that.
Okay. Well, in any case.
If anybody wants to hear it.
All right. I think that's it. I think that's all the announcements we have right now. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with more Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, you can go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. By the way, I'm just waiting for the printing for my 2 new albums. I got 2 new albums coming out. The Sacred Heart of Hum and The Secret Heart of Hum. They are coming out soon. The printing is at the printers right now. I'm waiting for the printer to actually just print up the printing, and then they'll be ready. So very soon I'll have 2 new albums out. They'll be on stonebreath.bandcamp.com. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/strangefamiliars, where you can join the Strange Familiars Gathering group. We are on Instagram @strangefamiliars, one word. Please give us a follow there. For merch, go to strangefamiliars.com/merch. And for everything else, links to everything we do, go to strangefamiliars.com.
His horns, beware of long Lankin that lives in the moss. Said the Lord to his lady as he went on his way, beware of long Lankin that lives in the hay. See, the doors are open and the windows up in, and leave not a space for a mouse to peep in. The doors were bolted and the windows were pinned. Through a crack in the window, long Lankin crept in. There's the Lord of the household, cried long Lankin. He's away off to London, said the false nurse to him. There's the lady of the household, cried long Lankin. She's asleep in her chamber, said the false nurse to him. Long Lankin, he sleeps in his cradle, said the false nurse to him. We'll pinch him and we'll prick him with the needle and the pin, and that will make the lady for to come down to him. So they pinched him and they pricked with the needle and the pin. The false nurse held the basin for the blood to drip in. Oh nurse, how you slumber, oh nurse, how you sleep. You leave my poor son for to cry and to weep. Nurse, how you slumber, oh nurse, how you snore. You leave my poor baby for to cry and to roar. I tried him with the milk and I've tried him with the pap. Come down, my pretty lady, and rock him on your lap. I tried him with the rattle, and I tried him with the bell. Come down, my pretty lady, and rock him yourself. How dare I come downstairs in the dead of the night, when there's no candles burning and no fire alight? The lady, she came downstairs, she was thinking no harm. Long Lankin stood ready for to catch her in his arms. Now there's blood in the kitchen, there's blood in the hall, there's blood in the parlor where the lady did fall. There's blood in the basin, there's blood in the bed, there's blood in the cradle where the baby lies